You may have known somebody who's joined a cult or been completely brainwashed in some way. Hopefully that person has managed to get out. It might even be you, and rebuilt their life. Sadly though, as we'll see in this video, there are many who did not get out and either were forced to commit suicide or were involved in an act of mass murder. So what I want to do in this no-holds-barred video is to look at 5 of the worst brainwashing cults of all time and the appalling things they did. And if you need more information, there is a link in the description below to a blog post that I've wrote, a very detailed blog post on this subject that covers everything in this video. And before we do start to look at these cults, remember to subscribe to the channel. My future happiness depends on you subscribing. Let's start with the evilest of the brainwashing cults of all time, one that I put at number 1, and that is the People's Temple, run by Jim Jones. This was the scene on November the 18th, 1978, in the jungles of Guyana. 900 people lying face down, some of them holding hands, seemingly having committed mass suicide. A fatal mix of cyanide and fruit drink mixer was given first of all to babies and children, apparently squirted in their mouths, and then taken by the adults. It was the spectacular end of the People's Temple cult run by Jim Jones. He called it an act of revolutionary suicide, but a third of the dead were children in no position to voluntarily participate in such an act, and many of the people there were terrified to try and escape from the compound, which was dubbed Jonestown, in case they were shot by one of his many guards. From the mid-1960s, Jim Jones had even achieved a degree of respectability as his cult had grown. And in fact, one testimonial dinner was attended by leading politicians. But journalists began to investigate the People's Temple at some of the financial improprieties and allegations of abuse within the cult. Jones then suddenly took the entire cult, or nearly the entire cult, off to Jonestown. That was the compound in the Guyanan jungle. That was the name that was given to that compound, named after him. A Democrat congressman, Leo Ryan, flew out to Guyana to look at what was going on, and several cult members indicated that they wanted to get the hell out of there. Now, Jones was absolutely furious at Ryan being there, and when the congressman went back to his small private plane at a nearby airstrip to fly out, he was riddled with bullets, along with several other journalists and people who were there. And this was an appalling act at the time, the murder of a congressman. Now Jones knew that the entire weight of the US authorities was about to come down crashing on him. Jones ordered a mass suicide, and there hadn't been a suicide seen on this scale, 900 plus people, since the mass suicide at Masada of Zealots, something like 2,000 years earlier, which had been those zealots who were trying to avoid being captured by the Roman Empire. That's the scale of the suicide that was seen at Jonestown that shocked the world. Well, Jonestown certainly set the standard for cult madness, but at number 2, I've got the Branch Davidians at Waco, and they come a very close second. They exploded into the world's headlines in early 1993 when they were involved in a shootout with federal and state law enforcement at their compound in Waco, Texas. So began a 51-day siege that gripped TV viewers in the United States and around the world. What lay behind this was actually a long history of confrontation within the Branch Davidians, and the full details are in the blog post with the link below. But however, basically what it was the Branch Davidians were a split off from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In 1987, rival factions of the Branch Davidians had fought each other in a gun battle for control of the Waco compound, and the winning faction was led by a man called David Koresh. Now, Koresh was the Hebrew for Cyrus. That's a reference to the Persian king who delivered the Jewish people from Babylonian bondage in the Bible. Koresh believed himself to be some kind of messiah, and with his newfound status took multiple wives, declaring that his children would eventually rule the earth. What worried the authorities were the amount of weapons being stockpiled at Waco, and when the authorities tried to take a closer look, 4 federal agents were shot dead, and this is what sparked the 51-day siege. Unfortunately, it's also sparked a whole slew of conspiracy theories ever since, which I am not going to give the oxygen of publicity to in this video. Now let's go to Japan for our next brainwashing cult. This was a really dreadful organization that came to prominence in the mid-90s, Aum Shinrikyo. On March 20th, 1995, the Aum Shinrikyo cult released sarin gas on the Tokyo metro system, killing 13 people and injuring hundreds more. The leader of the cult was Shoko Asahara, who's seen here being interviewed sometime before the attack on Japanese TV, and he was being questioned about his cult and also his kind of blended hodgepodge of esoteric beliefs. Asahara, by the way, believed that he was the new Christ, going one better than David Koresh, who just thought he was a messiah. Apparently there is a difference. What was most scary about the Aum cult was the extent and the complexity of its global business operations. For example, it had an arms dealing venture within Russia and also was somehow involved with uranium mining in Australia. And it was said that the cult had access to something like $1 billion in available cash. The sarin gas attack was thankfully botched to a degree because the gas failed to vaporize. It was in liquid form in bags that were punctured by umbrellas. If it had managed to vaporize as intended, it could have killed hundreds and possibly thousands of people. Asahara and several of his cult members languished in jail for several years, but eventually in 2018 they were all hanged. Japan still has the death penalty for the most extreme cases, and this was certainly deemed to qualify. Well, now for something completely different. At number 4, it's the Solar Temple, who I can only describe as a bunch of suicidal Knights Templar. In 1994, 48 people were found dead at different locations in Switzerland and Montreal in Canada. The locations were houses or annexes which had been burnt deliberately, so the bodies were charred. The following year, in 1995, in Grenoble in France, another 16 people were found in very similar circumstances, their bodies charred and arranged in a star formation. Same again in 1997, only this time just 5 bodies, and they were arranged in Quebec in a cross formation. What on earth was going on? By 1997, the 2 cult founders, Joseph Dimambro and Luc Jouret, had both died back in 1994. Joseph Dimambro was a French-Canadian jeweler. He was apparently also a Rosicrucian, and he was also convinced that he was the reincarnation of Moses and possibly also the pharaoh Akhenaten. Luc Jouret was a Belgian homeopath born in the Congo when it was under Belgian rule, and he had joined several Neo-Templar organizations, that is, organizations that believe that the Knights Templar were not crushed in the early 14th century but continued under the radar. Now, just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with Neo-Templar organizations. I've come across a few myself, but Jure was involved in a branch of Neo-Templarism that was mixed with other less agreeable beliefs. What emerged was the two had set up this highly secretive solar temple cult with its Templar-style rituals. But when they became disillusioned and believed that the new age that they thought was about to dawn was not about to dawn, then they just decided to end it all, apparently after a very lavish dinner. At number 5, I'm going for Heaven's Gate. This was a cult set up by Marshall Applewhite. Now, along with some of the other male leaders of this cult, he had been voluntarily castrated sometime before the events that were about to unfold. Now, in March 1997, the Halle-Bop comet was due to pass the planet Earth, and the Heaven's Gate cult believed that in the tail of the comet there was an extraterrestrial craft that they all needed to board. Now, the only way to board that craft was to get rid of their bodies or earthly containers. And how were they going to do that? Well, they were going to have to commit suicide. So just to make it very clear, they were going to have to ditch their bodies by killing themselves in order to liberate their true selves, their souls or spirits, that would then ascend and hitch a ride on the passing UFO. So on March 26, 1997, the San Diego police burst into a suburban residence and found 39 people, all dressed the same because the cult had a kind of uniform. They all had the same haircuts as well. And they were all lying on bunk beds, having killed themselves. The way in which they'd committed suicide was a mixture of vodka and phenobarbital and then putting a plastic bag over their heads. Apparently cult members helped each other to do this, so it was a kind of phased suicide. Whether or not they managed to board the UFO, well, maybe we'll never know. However, the world did not end as they predicted, so there was nothing particularly to escape from. Okay, well, that's more than enough cult madness for one sitting. So what I'd like you to do is to share any examples you've had of brainwashing cults, whether it's yourself or people you know. And also what I'm going to do is share the contact details from some organizations that can help out in the description below, just in case you know anybody who is in trouble, because we really should pull together to help people in these situations. So until next time, thank you for watching and goodbye.